wait, never mind. As she said. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Christopher Simmons. I am here with Ojore, and we are going to have a great conversation about grief. Welcome to the weight room. Like I said before, my name is Christopher Simmons. I am a licensed social worker here in the great cold state of New Jersey. I work with Black and brown teens. I work with Black and brown males as well. We work a lot of things: grief, sexuality, gender, whether you name it, we talk about it. All right. All right. Tell us a little about yourself. Tell the people.
What's good, brother? Thank you for having me on. My name is Ojore Bushfan. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in San Diego, California, the Sunshine State. I'm currently working at a community college where I see a wide range of students, age ranges, cultural background, genders, just a vast variety of students. And I'm also part of the weight room. So I'm working with Black males, adolescents, and adults.
Yeah. Weight room's got some good work. We got some good work going on here. So today's topic. Sorry, lost my voice for a second. Today's topic, we're talking about grief, associated with fathers, right? Um, for me, I know my father really wasn't around, right? So my mother took that place, as a lot of Black and brown men. That's kind of I don't say that's the narrative, but it's a realistic thing that's in our community that we see. People that we see, the kids we see, our own experiences. It's a unfortunate thing that we see. For me, it's a weird dynamic, right? So my mother took that place, right? And I've had some good father figures, in my life, throughout my life, but it's not the same as having your father there, right? The person that you look up to ask you that you like, hey, that's dad, right? I lost my mother in 2017 to brain cancer, and that was a tough deal. So for me, for a while, it's been like a double mourn. So I'm mourning the loss of my mother, who also was the bedrock of our foundation. She was mom and dad, but also still growing up mourning the loss of my father, right? And it's not that in a physical sense, because he's still alive. I know where he's at, but mourning that kind of relationship, mourning that kind of the expectations, especially growing up in the 90s. You got the Uncle Phils, you got the Carl Winslows, you got the TV dad. You're like, oh, damn, where's mine?
Dr. Huxtable.
Yeah, Dr. Heathcliff.
Heathcliff.
What was the hardest part about losing your father for you? Like, how did you manage those feelings over time?
If I can answer that in context of just kind of setting the stage of the relationship I had with my father, because that has played a huge part in how I've grieved him and how I haven't grieved him as well. So my relationship with my father was very difficult, tough, distance, traumatic. He dealt with paranoid schizophrenia. And so from a kiddo, my experience was like him being hospitalized or him having these experiences of hearing voices and being what I perceived as out of control. And so it was really hard to connect with him for most of my life. As a child, we were close, and that was like helpful for our relationship. But as I grew older and became, a young man, that relationship just got more distance and more distance. So I think the hardest part about losing my father was he passed unexpectedly. So there was no repair. There was no, smoothing things out. There was no kind of having conversations. There was no opportunity for us to kind of build a bridge. There was no me having an opportunity maybe to even care for him in his older age. Um, and because our relationship was so distant and complicated, when he passed away, it was really easy for me to push him to the margins of my life in a sense.
Mm,
Not grieve him, not mourn him. Um, so almost like forget about him, to be transparent,
right.
because there was so much stuff that hadn't got healed or discussed or worked through. Um, and so over the years, I've managed and dealt with my grief and my relationship with him over time by not feeling, to be transparent,
Mm,
kind of forgetting about him. Um, but then as I, healed other aspects of my life in pertaining to him, um, I started to allow myself to feel. And similar as what you're talking about, I think what I started to realize is that there was always this. I think I've always mourned him, even when he was alive, because I never got to
right.
know him. I never really had a close connection with him. So I really felt this like there was always this sense of like there's this man in my house. I'm connected to him, but he's not guiding me. He's not
Mm,
helping me come into my own maleness, my own black maleness, right? Um, and so, I started to allow myself to feel the different emotions, the anger, the disappointment, um, also, the sadness, the loss, and even sometimes sit with like, man, I wish that we would have had time to heal some stuff
right.
so that I could have had a better relationship with him before he passed. Yeah,
That's a tough space. That's really a tough space to operate in.
yeah,
It's like at some point, you kind of feel. Well, I don't want to suppose those feelings on you, but I know, like for me, at some point in the healing process, there's you feel like, why am I doing more of this work? You become. I don't want to say spiteful,
yes,
but it's like,
yes.
why am I like? Hey, I'm the kid here. I may be grown. I may be 40, 50, 60 years old, but I'm still the kid
Hmm.
here. And my emotional age
Yes.
right now is I'm still that 10-year-old that's trying to figure out why you're not here. Where are you at when I need you?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like now, like I have
Mm-hmm.
to create. Why do I have to create this space for you to come in? But you're not doing the work. I'm doing all the work to get you here, and it's just like, why? And I feel like that space blocks a lot. That process is the stopping point for a lot of folks, a lot of black men, for a myriad of reasons. Whether it be pride or it's just
Mm-hmm.
anger. You know, I don't want to say, well, in some situations, shame. It all depends, especially culturally, where you are on this.
Yeah.
It's a
And
tough pill.
it is, and I also imagine that it's partly like knowing like how do you heal something that's yours and somebody else's. Like, we don't all know how to heal ancestral wounds, right? And so,
Exactly.
or the intergenerational wounds that we end up carrying. Some of us don't even know that it's what we're carrying. And so, yeah,
Right.
I imagine it is, all those things frustrating, like I got to do this work for me and for you. Like,
Right.
bruh, like I'm trying to get me right, but I got to do this
Right.
work for me and
Help
for
me.
you. It can be daunting.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember, not to get too deep into the woods, like maybe a year or two ago, I got a call because shout out to my family on my dad's side. Really, I got some cousins and uncle and aunt that really, over the years, have really tried to keep us connected with that side of the family. Um, and I really
Mhm,
appreciate that. Even though I know we don't talk much, but I really do appreciate them keeping that olive branch open. And they reached out. You know, my dad's hard headed. That's probably where I get it from. Um,
mhm,
an incident happened, and he hit. He hurt his head. Right in the hospital, smoked cold. Out cold. Uh, and I remember going and seeing him, and I'm leaving, and like the immediate rage that
mhm,
overcame me, the emotions, the wave of like the cycle of anger, sadness, guilt, you name it,
mhm.
pain. Because I was in real time like,
Yeah.
I already lost my mom. I already lost my dad in the 90s, but now I'm really like, there's one thing about finality. Once someone passed, that's really when you have that real finality. So there is no second
Yeah.
chance. So, a lot of times we put things off thinking, hey, someday this will be better, someday this will be better. And then once that finality comes, it becomes real. So for me, it was like I was pissed, I was crying, I was upset. And I'm like, this is somebody I don't talk to, but I'm like, damn, now he's about to check out, you know, I really feel like an orphan now because I already kind of had no, my mom was the end
Mhm,
all be all for me, but
mhm,
now like my literal father is looks like he's about to transition out this world. So I'm like, I'm mad for me. I'm mad for my kids because like now my kids don't get to even have a chance to have a relationship with their actual grandfather. Like there was so much anger and rage. Like it was it was a hard experience. Now, granted, he pulled out. He pulled through. Thankfully, he has made some modest attempts to try to reconnect, and I need to, and still
mhm,
to this day, I need to be better about moving forward with that because there is still some things that I'm healing from to even get to that point because I made a lot of attempts to connect as a young
uh-huh,
adult,
mhm.
and things just did not go the right way. Not even the right way; it was just foolishness, to be honest with you. But
Well,
connecting. Oh, no, go ahead, brother.
y thank you for sharing that 'cause, that last part really resonated. It's in my experience, what was a block between, like, letting my father in for me to grieve him was the stuff that I was holding and carrying. So as I hear you say, there's still some stuff that might be getting in the way of, you connecting with your father. That really resonated with me. And that was the stuff I had to, in my own time, begin to like work through and release. And it took a long time, a long time. Um, but it just speaks to like, you know, what gets in the way, of
Mm,
repair, of restoring, and of grieving. Um, and I'm
it's
glad to hear that your pops made it through because as you mentioned, if he hadn't, there would have been this ripple effect of
mhm,
like that impacted relationship with you and then with your kids and what they wouldn't have had a chance to experience.
right. And I was mad like there's no way my children should meet their grandfather on his deathbed. That's an experience.
Mm,
That's an
mhm,
experience I'll never forget.
mhm.
But you know what?
Yeah.
We get in our own way as men, as people, but generally as black men, we get in our own way a lot of times. But s- to pivot back, how do you feel like? Because when you were talking about your father, like that, you have children?
No, not yet.
Okay. What do you feel like
but I can still answer that. I can
No, no,
still,
I'm just thinking. I
if
want
I
to
know where
phrase
you're
it
going, I think I can.
here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like after losing your father? How do you feel like that has changed the way you view the roles of a father as how they show up as family for their family? I'm sorry.
Hmm. I think it's colored every aspect of how I see Black fatherhood. So while I don't have kids of my own, I've been lucky to be, an uncle, a godfather, and I think in those ways that I show up, I sometimes realize, like, man, I missed out on a lot with my pops. Like, to feel myself engaged with, my nephew, my niece, spending time with them, watching them when they were little, like helping raise them and guide them. Like, man, I missed out on a lot. Um,
Great.
and so it's helped me to see like the broader scope of a father. Um, my father was the type of father who was like, I put a roof over your head, I put clothes in your back, I put food in your belly. And I'm like, bro, you doing the bare minimum, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's some other
he's
things I needed from you.
he's Troy from Fences.
Right, right, right. And so I think it's shaped how I see myself as a future father, as being engaged, being involved. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, my pops, he was in the house. I grew up
Mm,
with him, but he wasn't involved. He wasn't engaged. He didn't know much about what was going on in my life. He couldn't tell you, my likes, my dislikes, and so we were kind of strangers. And so
mm,
being an uncle, a godfather, has really helped me to see how, when you're engaged in a person's life, it just it's fulfilling. I think my niece and nephew have, enjoyed me being in their lives. I've gotten to know them. And I think that at some I think in some point it's also made me a bit afraid of being a father, to be transparent. Because I'm like, I don't want to do what my father did. I didn't have the best example. And so I've had to do a lot of work around not attaching myself to that narrative or that identity. And like, I'm not my father,
right.
even though I grew up with him and I have this experience. Like, if I'm blessed to have a child or two, you know, I'm going to do something different. And so it's taken me a while to kind of separate myself from
Right.
that fear of, being a father, 'cause I know that I'm going to show up differently. I ain't going to be perfect, but I know I'm going to show up differently.
And it's so hard to not
Mm,
repeat the sins of the father. No, I I had to plug that
yeah,
in there. But no, it's on a serious note. I wanted to piggyback because you spoke about something that was like a crazy phenomenon that we don't really talk about. Having the stranger in the house. So you're in the house with your father's,
yeah,
growing up. However, it's a stranger in the house. Like you're getting the bare essentials, but you're lacking all the other things that
yeah.
make a father a father. So you're growing up
Hmm.
fatherless with the father in the house. That's crazy, but it's real, and I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah, yeah.
that's
It's
based
very,
off of a
yeah.
lot of what our fathers are, or our fathers have experienced growing up.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Yeah, definitely is something that was, I think, passed down. And I didn't know much
mhm,
about my father's father. And so I definitely think that whatever he went through as a young man, it got played out, with my mother, with my sister, and myself. Um, but and it's a very peculiar thing because as I think about living in the house with a parent who's not engaged with you, it's
mhm,
like this kind of dual experience of like, well, you're here, but you're not accessible, but you're here.
right,
And so it's a real like strange dynamic that I grew up with, which I think made it real easy for me to at some point like disregard and just check out from him because I had, like you, I had other males in my life, thankfully, right? Thankfully, I had other males in my life who were like, role models or father figures, whether they were coaches or teachers. So I had a little bit of, some father figure out in the community. But under my own roof, there was this person that was supposed to guide me into this identity that left me behind. So I had to figure out a lot on my own,
Right.
which, you know, I was led astray, trying to figure it out, or my peers were teaching me and we were all teaching each other the wrong stuff. So, you know,
Okay. So yeah, I can dig that. And I really, I get it. I really
yeah.
understand where you're coming from. For me, it's like I think early on, especially, once my kids were babies, like when they started getting older, it was like I'm not missing shit. That's my one
Mm,
cuss word for the stream. But I'm not missing it. I'm not missing anything. I'm not gonna miss any events. I'm gonna be at everything. And to this day, I rarely miss anything. I don't care who you are and what's going on. I'm not missing anything they have going on because I know what it's like to be there. My mom would come to some of the things that she could, but my mom was also very sick morbid, so she wasn't able to actually make a lot of the
mm,
things. So I remember my eighth grade graduation. My mom couldn't come because she was in the hospital. Um,
mhm,
those are kind of the things that impact you, and then once it's like when you become a father. I know we're talking about grief today, but it's like when you're talking about when you're like become a parent, you become a father. Oftentimes we come into this with these preconceived notions about what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. And around halfway through the journey between 0 to 10, we throw all that shit away. And then we just start realizing what's real from what's fake. But one of the things that stays constant is like, what are your core beliefs as a parent are? So for me, it was
mhm,
always being there because of the lack. I don't want to say lack of support, but like the lack of being there when I wanted somebody. Everybody else had their parents there, and I'm just there. Hey, and I'm grateful for my aunts and uncles and cousins that showed up and they did, but it's not the same.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it
And
sounded really meaningful when you mentioned that you show up to everything. Like there's something about that that's really meaningful for you.
oh man, conversation's gonna be tight, but it's good.
Yeah.
Um, when you think about your dad, right? Given the history you have, what do you think some of the lessons or values, or what are any lessons or values passed on that you hold on to now, or was there situations kind of like what I alluded to, I guess, a little before, like lessons and values that you learned as a byproduct of lack of involvement, we'll call it, from your father that you hold on to now?
Mm. I think what comes up is I learned a lot about how I don't want to be
Mm,
from my father. Um, and I think, similar to as you were talking about, like the importance of showing up, I think I learned the importance of being engaged, being connected, being involved, being somebody that, a child can feel safe around. That's, I think, the biggest thing for me because I didn't feel too safe around my father. And so I
mm,
think for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned was to create a connection, to allow, whether it's my child or a young person I'm working with to be able to connect with me. Um, and I mean, some of the values, I think, despite our relationship, he was a creative man. He was an artist. And so he was a hard worker. And so there are some things that, despite the challenges and some of the ways he showed up, that um, I just appreciated witnessing from a distance. I even try to like duplicate some of his art on my own. Like, I try to stay connected to my own creativity to connect with him sometimes. And so, yeah, I think I learned a lot about how I don't want to be and what's important to me because of my father. And sometimes I'm like, it's supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to like
Right.
get all these values and lessons, but that wasn't my journey with him. And so it's really important for me to show up in certain ways because my father didn't show up in certain ways.
It's crazy. A lot of times I'll say it's expected a lot for fathers and parents for, the stream to go downhill. We pour into our kids, we pour into our kids, and pour on kids. But I've learned, at least in my fatherhood journey, a lot of the lessons and values that we instill in our kids are a reflection of today, of what we're doing with our kids. A lot of the lessons we learn are kind of in vivo, in real time, as we're parenting our kids,
Mhm,
and we expand on those things. We learn a lot about ourselves as parents by parenting our kids. Because
mhm, mhm.
I don't care what y'all say, I don't care how many books y'all read, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. Okay, we're learning and we're doing the best we
Right.
can as parents, in a world that has no real directions right now. Um, we're learning on the fly and kind of go,
Mm,
me being in the driver's seat now as a parent, thinking back to like things that my mom would have to do. Hindsight is really 2020. Is like you really realize what they were trying to establish for you, what the things they had to
mhm,
go through. So I feel like a lot of the things we learn are in real time now, but also just like the calluses that are made, the calluses we make not trying to be our fathers, I feel like sometimes block us
mm,
from being the best fathers we can be because we're so preoccupied not trying to be like our father, not trying to repeat the cycle. I have to overly be there. I have to be involved. I have to do this. I have to do that. Instead, we're so preoccupied by not trying to be this person. We're missing out on the person we can be for our children. But for me, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the stuff comes from my mother, just
mm,
being open-hearted, generous. My mom was the kind of person that would give you the shirt off her back and then come ask me for mine. But she would definitely go to the end of the road for you and just operate in genuineness. That's I can say that's the one thing,
mm,
the one value that I've acquired. You're looking at the father figures in my life, the way my uncles take care of their families, take care of their children.
mhm, mhm.
I remember that was one thing I was always, kind of jealous about growing up. I'm like, everybody's in this two-parent household, and I'm just sitting here like,
Yeah.
you know, and we live in a biblical household, and I always hear comparison is a thief of joy. I'm like, all right, well, still, anyway.
Mhm, mhm.
I mean, I still feel the way I feel, but
Can't help but feel that way. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But just watching how these black men really took care of their children and the way they were involved and the unsettledness they would have that I've seen in my family, whether it be mothers or fathers, just the unabashed, this is who you are.
Mm,
Every one of my cousins and even my brothers and sisters, they knew the schools knew who the parents were. You wouldn't cut twice calling home about a kid
mhm,
because you knew it was going to happen when they come up there. And it wasn't on any foolishness. It was just being 10 toes down about your kids and not let anybody really slight them in any way. We were always held accountable.
mhm.
But when things happened and it wasn't exactly the way the schools would say it, they know. But I'll just get back on track because, like I said, it's a little bit of a tough topic for me today. Um, but I want to operate that space. And I want to own it because it's a
Before
lot of.
we, mhm. No, I was gonna just say before getting back on track, just I don't know. For me, I just needed to let that statement you said breathe a bit about how in the effort of trying to not be our fathers, we create calluses. Something about that I just like needed that to breathe for a moment, because it really resonated with like feedback I've gotten from the people closest to me that have said something similar, and always remind me that I'm not my father, and I know that, right? Like I know I'm not him, but you can't help but wonder what you might have picked up because that was my model, right? That was my model of like not only relating to children, his children, but also his partner, right? My mother. And so, um, yeah, just something about that really resonated with me. And I was like, I need to let that breathe for a moment. So thank you for saying that and putting that out there. Because it really, yeah, it really resonated with me.
That's no problem, brother. You know, we these are our reference points. You know, as children,
Yeah.
what we observe and view of our environment, the people in it, our parents, our friends, these are our reference points that we subconsciously refer to when we are adults and are put in these similar situations. So we're if we're seeing absent people in our lives, it's hard to build relationships with other people as adults. And I know it sounds cliche, but like if I didn't see my parents having open communication, if I didn't see my father show what his version of love was to, my mother, not to say that we can't, but we obviously we grow up, we have our own thoughts, our own moods, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, that subconscious, that reference, that hard drive that we go back to is always going to go back to home because those are our earliest thoughts, our earliest core memories. That's how our core beliefs are solidified most of the time at that young age. Listen, yeah,
And that's why it's important to be in spaces like therapy or spaces to gain the awareness of like, oh, that's what that is. I'm operating
right.
from that reference point or from that hard drive, but I don't have to do that. I can do something different. I can do some work and operate differently, right? And have
Exactly.
different choices.
We can
Yeah,
always
yeah.
rewire. We just got to get to the shop.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how do you
Yeah.
navigate that? Like when we're talking about like milestones, special moments without your dad around. I know like now, especially when we talk with folks that are grieving, that lose loved ones, we always talk about that first year, that first Father's Day, that first birthday, first Thanksgiving, first Christmas, your birthday, so on and so forth. How do you navigate that? Or is there anything you do to like try to keep his memory alive? Is that something that you're open to, like at this stage?
At this stage, currently, yes. I think when he first passed, so he passed away when I was like in my early 20s. He's been
Mm,
transitioned about 19 years now. And so I think I've been on a journey of like how I mourn him, how I remember him for probably about most of the time he's been gone. Um, I've tucked him away.
mm,
And it's been, doing my work in therapy, what I realized, like, I mean, he's a part of me, right? Without him, there is no me. And so I had to do some work in kind of like retrieving him and bringing him back into my life. And so I think it was one night I was at my altar space and I just realized, like, I haven't been talking to him at my altar space. And so I
mm.
started to make like the intention to bring him into my altar time. And when I when I do I've gotten a few readings, um, spiritual readings. He shows up in them, and he shows up in a way where he's taking accountability, and wanting to support from the ancestral realm. And so for me, that was like confirmation, like, spiritually, he understands the impact he had on my life, and he wants to be of support. So I would say the past year, I've been really intentional about, talking to him at my altar space, including him in certain rituals, celebrating his birthday, celebrating his transition day, celebrating Father's Day,
Mm,
and looking at old photos, you know, going through my waterworks with the old photos, because that's where it's mainly connected, because there was a period of time, like infant through childhood, we were very close, and I'm
mhm,
telling you that messes me up every time, because it's like, what happened? How
right.
did we go from this to what I remember the most? And so I've had to do a lot of, I think what you mentioned earlier, I had to realize that, my pops he did the best he could with what he was working with, the cards he was dealt with, coming from the projects in Boston, the life he led before he had me and my sister. And so I've had to do a lot of like forgiving and having empathy, and just realizing that, you know, none of this was like intentional because he didn't love me, like me. He just had his own stuff that he was navigating in his own life. And so I am making an intention to continue to keep him active in my memory. And so, just all the ways I can remember him, I do my best to do that,
Yeah,
which has
that
been
that hit
healing for me.
that hit home because just like you said, you had that early stage of connectedness, and then it just changed, and that was like for me the same thing. Like boom, everything's great. One of the biggest memories I have of my dad was this is dating me, right? For you
Hmm.
YNs watching. Um, I remember the Doctor Doolittle music video was on, right? This was back when they had special premieres. So the Doctor, it was Aaliyah's whatever song she did for the soundtrack was on the TV, and then my mom was standing in the
Hmm.
hallway,
Hmm.
and my dad was coming up the stairs, and then I look over, and then he's like trying to dance with my mom. She's just not having it because my dad was a goofball. Like that's just him. That's his personality. And I'm like, and then after that, things just like changed, and he was just gone,
Hmm.
like gone. And every experience and interaction I had after that was like a negative one. It was just like, and I couldn't understand it. Like, no, that's dad. Like he would bring me to Hess trucks every year for Christmas because he worked at Hess. I would go hang out at Howard Johnson with him because he worked there as
Hmm.
well. You know, riding the carts down the, laundry carts down the hallway. Like that was dad, and then it's just gone.
Yeah,
Um,
almost like the plug got pulled from it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
for years, especially my teenage years and my early childhood, I just didn't understand it, and I guess my mom did the best she could to not like try to throw him under the bus or anything like that for whatever reason, whatever the real reason why the situation between them happened. Um, that was it took a very long time to try to navigate that. Like at least for me with my mom, it's like
Yeah.
memories, milestones. For the longest time, it was a very difficult time going back to the going back to the cemetery. I think my mom passed in 2017. That wasn't that long ago, so going back there is very difficult even still. It's a tough stretch. My mom's birthday is in August. She passed in September.
Hmm.
It's just late summer to fall is a tough time, but trying to just commemorate her memory, you know, continue to strive to be the best that I can be. But even today, there's certain songs I can't listen to. But I know if I want to feel more
Hmm.
connected, sometimes I'll put them songs on and just go through the waterworks and let myself,
Yeah.
you got to let it breathe sometimes and let it heal. Um, because, we make some impulsive decisions when we try to keep things pent up. We try to, you know, be the strong man, and it's not real. And I think that's one of the hardest things about grief is we always have to, as black men or just men in general, we have to, chin up, chest out, pull ourselves up for our bootstraps. We have to do all this exhausting work to try to put on a facade of strength, and when it's real, in reality, we're hurt, and it's very tiresome and maddening to try to ignore grief, because
Mm.
grief doesn't go away if you don't deal with it, and that's the problem. We
No, it doesn't.
circumvent, we circumvent the process, and then we never get through the cycles of grief, and then we're just always boom, 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 back, boom, 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 back. Um, what would you say?
Yeah, and know, just quickly before you move on, just to
You
respond to
good, you
what you
good.
just mentioned, um, you know, grief is it's just tough, and it's tough to navigate because, in my experience with it, in my walk with it, you never know when it's going to pop his head up, when it's going to tap you on the shoulder, when it's going to massage your shoulder and say, "I'm here.
Right,
I want you to feel this."
right.
And I think I've heard folks talk about like wanting to get rid of it, wanting to move through it quickly, wanting to separate from it. And, my experience is like if you've loved someone, like grief is going to be your forever friend.
Right.
Yes, it may change, it may look different, year after year, it may feel different, may feel not as heavy, but I mean, I feel it's always going to be there. Like, because my mother passed as well, and I know
Mm,
her birthday is in October with mine, and so I know when September comes, I'm already feeling it. I'm already ready for it to come. 'Cause I know grief is going to find me because
yeah.
October birthdays, November holidays, December, January, New Year, her passing date. So that whole block of time, I know grief is going to be sitting right next to me. And so
Yeah.
I've learned to welcome grief like a friend. It's the homie, right? The
Right.
homie grief is gonna come and hang out with me, and we're gonna chop it up. We're gonna talk about some things. We're gonna feel some stuff, and then he'll be on his way and he'll come back again. But the idea that this is something that is supposed to be gone or that you're supposed to not have, I think sets folks up because to love somebody and to not have them is to invite grief into your life.
Hmm. I feel like there's a way to go about it, and this may sound very Baptist of me, but you can have grief, but grief doesn't have to have you. So you can
Yeah,
figure out
yeah,
how
yeah.
to manage your grief. You can figure out how to cope with grief, because, like you said, it's
Mhm.
y'all partners now.
Yeah, yeah,
It goes back to the old notion of healing isn't linear. You're gonna have some good. There might be
yeah,
some good years where you know those cycles don't hit you. Like my mom's birthday is August 1st. She passed September 27th. Wedding anniversary was October 8th. You got Thanksgiving, you got Christmas, you got seasonal depression. I'm getting, daylight savings. I'm getting my ass whooped from August to December
right.
every year.
Facts.
So
Right,
it's just like
right, right, right.
it's become a lot better, you know. For me, it's just been trying to normalize. Hey, you're gonna have these dark spells, not dark spells. I won't take that, retract that. You're gonna have these periods of despair, these periods of sadness, loneliness, whatever, however it manifests that year and
Mhm.
at that time. But I feel like having a good game plan to deal with it, having a good support system, a support cast. And when I say support
Yeah.
cast, it doesn't mean you have to have
Mhm,
like
mhm.
8 people, 10 toes down. It could just be one person plus your therapist.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoever
Mhm.
you seek counsel in, good counsel. You don't want to just talk to Shaquita from up the block, but you want to make sure you're confiding in people that you trust and have your best interests at heart. because sometimes you need people to keep it real with you, and sometimes you just need people that are just gonna be there and listen, because a lot of times we don't necessarily want an answer. We just want to talk and be heard.
Yes, yes.
Like we
People who
just
can
don't.
hold your grief.
Right? I just don't, and it's not fair, right? And I want to be clear. It's you're not supposed to trauma dump on anybody else. But when we have
Mhm,
these systems in place, these connections, these people in our life, we all confide in each other. We all vent. We do these things. You take the heavy stuff to where it needs to be. We're gonna have our spaces where we things get out of pocket and we kind of bring ourselves back together. But I feel like that is the best advice I can give someone struggling with the loss of, you know, loss of a parent, loss of a father.
mm,
To be living is to have loss. So loss is something
yeah,
that
yeah,
is not a new feature of life. But the more we learn how to grieve, the more we learn how to cope, the more we learn how to get a handle on it. Because it's not something you can control per se, right? But the more we get an
uh-huh, uh-huh,
understanding of how our grief operates and how our body responds to that grief, the easier it is to navigate that.
mhm, mhm,
But we can't get to that space of being rehardwired, fixing the circuits, understanding until we're open about why we're grieving what we're grieving. Why am I so upset about losing my father? What does this actually mean to me? What am I losing?
yeah,
What are all the multiple things on this wheel about? What am I mad about? Because we're not, we're sad, but what am I
mhm,
mad about? What am I
mhm,
angry? What is the primary emotion I'm feeling right now?
yeah. What's the emotion and what's the narrative? What's the story that I hold, right? What's
Right.
the story I carry about either my father, the loss of my father, yeah, what's the story? What are the emotions?
Excuse me.
And I appreciate you also bringing in the body, right? Like identifying how you carry your grief somatically. Is it the tension in the neck or the shoulders, or is it that tension in the gut? Like where is grief showing up in your body? And being able to lean on people who can hold your grief. One of the things I've realized when it comes to grief is that not everybody can hold your grief. People want to tell you to move on, or they're in a better place, or I don't need to hear all that bull. I don't want to
Yeah,
hear all
like,
that. I just want you
how do
to
you know?
let me
You called
be
them?
in my experience. Right, right, right. And so being able to kind of just talk about how you're feeling about the person you lost and the impact it's had without being told that you need to move in any direction to be over it. And, I don't like to give advice, but what I would share that's been helpful for me is the things that we've been talking about, right? Allowing yourself to feel, identifying what you're feeling, having creative outlets. Like for me, music is, a very helpful outlet.
Mm,
There's quite a few songs I listen to that when I look at old photos, they just bring up the emotion like that, like
yeah,
instantly. And sometimes I need that if I feel something is stuck. Like if I feel like
gotta
there's
get it
some grief
out.
that's stuck to come out, I will listen to a track all night long just to help it come out, right? And so whether it's music or art, painting, drawing, writing poetry, um, you know, and also finding some way to stay connected to the person who passed. That's been really important. Like I talk to my parents as if they're still alive. I talk about what's going on in my life. I talk about the challenges. I try to keep them, present in my life, even though they're not physically here. Um,
Mm,
yeah.
it's a tough that, and I appreciate that music piece because I mean, for me, like when I like I can't get my mom out, it's just like I will listen to it's the same song. I can't listen to it. And it's like instant waterworks. I'm welling up now just thinking about the
Mhm.
song. It's like we grew up on Fred Hammond in our household. That was the man.
Hmm.
So, You Are the Living Word comes on,
Hmm.
and it's just like, phew. I'll never forget the last night I was on my way up to the
Yeah.
hospital on the train to see her. 30-minute ride, and I listened to that same song over and over and over again. Like,
Hmm. Hmm. On repeat. Yeah.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's a lot. Grieving is it's something that we all do, and we all do it in different ways. And
Hmm.
one of
Hmm.
the key things
Hmm.
and I thank you for exuding this today. In order to grieve, there is a certain level of, and before I say it, this is one of the other blockades that a lot of Black men have, even getting to the grieving process. It requires us to have a level of vulnerability.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We
Hmm.
have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to be open, to be transparent about how we're feeling and what we're feeling, and to the level of what we feel. Because we can have all the support systems in the world. If we can't be open and vulnerable about how we're feeling, it don't mean nothing.
I agree. um, the word vulnerability gets thrown around a lot, but in this context, I agree 100%. Allowing ourselves to be seen and witnessed. I think there's something about being witnessed
Mm,
in grief, because so many folks grieve alone, in isolation. So to have grief witnessed, I feel can be really healing. Um, and when it comes to being vulnerable, and I always talk with men about being mindful about who you're sharing, who you're being vulnerable with, because not
right.
everyone deserves our vulnerability. To be transparent.
Absolutely. Some people don't even
I've
know what to
been
do with it.
open and vulnerable with folks, and right, 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 or it gets boomerang back in a malicious way.
Right.
And so it's like, and we deserve spaces to be seen, and for
Right.
what we share to be held, you know, held and respected. Um, and so I do like how you mentioned that there's no one way to grieve. All of us are going to grieve differently, and so there's no one way to do it. Um,
Right. Well, hey, man, brother, I appreciate you coming on tonight and having this conversation. It was a heavy conversation. It was definitely a lot heavier than I thought it would be. Um,
mm,
yeah, definitely. When you talk about grief, as clinicians, you just feel like, okay, you understand it, so on and so forth. But once you get into the nitty gritty of it and you start using self, that's a difficult piece to navigate,
yes,
and
yes.
especially trying to remain objective. I appreciate you allowing me into this space and having this conversation with you. Um, yeah,
I thank you for having me. I thank you for having me and for facilitating this conversation. Very meaningful, and I think that more conversations like this, can happen for Black men with Black men, because many of us are struggling with things even outside of grief. But when you add grief, that's a whole nother layer of things. And so
absolutely.
I hope that for the folks who who are watching, who end up watching this, that they take some things away from it, and there can be some tips that can help them to start their grieving process, and hopefully find someone to support them in this process,
Right,
because it's a lifelong journey.
right.
It's a lifelong journey, and so I thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Before we wrap this up, just some housekeeping. This was a heavy conversation today. It may not be heavy to you, but for some viewers, this might be a very difficult topic. And the conversations that we've had today, the discussions we've had, may have elicited some feelings that you're already struggling with, or you didn't even know. It may have uncovered some wounds that you didn't even know you were need healing from. So I just want to. I would be remiss if we didn't say anything. If you are experiencing any kind of emotional distress from watching this video, please make sure you reach out to whatever services you have available to you in your area. Um, we'll have a link for if you want to talk to anybody at the weight room, or if you need anything more emergent, please don't hesitate to reach out. Um, yeah, thank you all. Like I said, thank you for watching this powerful conversation. Before we wrap up, I want to invite you to take the next step in your fatherhood journey with our upcoming workshop, Sins of the Father. Workshop is designed specifically for Black fathers and fathers to be, led by me. All right, that was a terrible teleprompter. But no, for real, it's not just about showing up. It's about healing, reflecting, and breaking generational cycles. We're going to have guided discussions, journaling, group activities, and we're going to explore what fatherhood means to you, how you show up for your children, and what changes you want to make moving forward. Whether you're navigating the legacy of your own father or creating a new path for your children. This workshop is a space for growth and community. And I cannot stress that word enough, community. It's going to be a 3-part series. The space is limited. So make sure you sign up early. Let's redefine fatherhood together. Check out the link in the description for more details, and I cannot wait to see you there. Brother, appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you having me, brother.